Okay, I'd like to call the 12th meeting of Community and Protective Services Committee to order. This is a virtual meeting during the COVID-19 emergency. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cpsc@london.ca. Councillor Hillier is unable to attend today's meeting, and Councillor Kaibaga is on a leave of absence during the federal election. So I think we have a quorum with the 3 members who are here. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest from either members of the committee or guests? I see Councillor Cassidy has joined us. Okay, if not, let's move to the consent agenda. Any items that colleagues would like to pull for separate debate? Okay, I don't see any. Can I have a mover for the consent items? Councillor Lewis, seconder. You'll need to raise your hand on the screen. Councillor Salee, thank you. Okay, seconded by Councillor Salee. Any discussion or questions on any of those items? Councillor Lewis, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take this opportunity to comment on 2 items very briefly. First is item 2.3, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. I just want to thank all the staff who were involved in updating this, as well as our community partners, because it involves not only our staff, but some outside agencies as well. So I want to thank them for the work that went into this. It's something that we have to file as a provincial requirement and keep up to date. And once again, they're meeting all those requirements and doing their part to keep our community as safe as possible in the event of an emergency. And sadly, we've seen that plan had to be put into use on more than one occasion during our term of council, but it's a good thing to have there so that everybody knows their role in a stressful time. So thanks to them for the work there. I also wanted to comment just briefly on 2.1, the research into labor market participation rates, the final report that's coming back. And this was something that was funded through provincial dollars for us to do a regional assessment. I'm encouraged to see some of the items that were identified in this report come back to us, because I think there are some opportunities that we as a municipality can consider. I certainly noted, and I know, Mr. Chair, that as a member of the London Transit Commission, you will have taken note of some of the considerations about transit considerations for people to be able to get to and from work, and how important it will be in transit planning for people to be able to access employment opportunities. I did note that there was still a fairly significant percentage who indicated that even with the barriers removed, they might still not be available to participate in the labor market. But I think when you see the percentages that said if some of the barriers removed, they would be participating, it was a pretty substantial number. And that's a good number for us to keep in mind as we look for ways to remove those barriers. And I'll just say again, most notably for me, the transit issue and the ability for people to get to the jobs that are available is the one that really stood out for me.
Thank you, Councillor Salee or Councillor Cassidy. Any questions or comments on any of the consent items? Okay, if not, I just wanted to say a couple things. One is on the labor market participation report. I appreciate Councillor Lewis drawing attention to the need for better transit, and I will say that there's a report coming to the Commission later in September about alternative service delivery in industrial areas, which I'm certainly looking forward to. We're still moving forward on that, despite the fact that the pandemic really impacted a lot of the growth plans for London Transit. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, I actually had the opportunity to serve in the advisory group as a representative from the London Police Services Board on the group that helped develop this plan. I know that was a really great team effort to try and engage the community, to restart and kind of re-engage the community when the pandemic hit. The consultation on this project ended partway through February 2020. So I think people's understanding of community safety and well-being was shifted quite a bit the month after that. And it's been quite the project to get it over the line, and I appreciate the leadership from Cheryl Smith and Dave O'Brien in particular over the course of the development of that plan. Happy to see the improvements coming through that transfer payment agreement for Carling Heights Optimist Center. That's great to see those improvements coming ahead, and also Labatt Park, which is a jewel in London. I just wanted to say on the fire pieces, I know these things are difficult to manage through, and I'm glad that we've got policies in place that allow for this kind of nimble decision-making when things happen that are really unfortunate, and we have to respond quickly, and we have to be able to act to seize on opportunities. And the single source procurement, for example, so we can get a fire engine in place so that we don't have any impacts on service beyond what's already been experienced, I think is really important. So I'm glad to see the staff acting so quickly on that front. And the extension of the homeless prevention services all the way into March of next year, also really glad to see that happening. So that's really all the items in the consent agenda. Certainly a lot of good news in the reports. Councillor Cassidy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies for being slow on the draw, trying to get my hand up and everything. I did want to comment on the homeless prevention response, the extension of the hotel room space. Actually, I'm pleased to see that being extended right through the winter, so that will eliminate some of that uncertainty as the colder months start approaching. And I'm really grateful also to the federal and the provincial governments for their funding for this. So it'll give us the isolation space, it's the testing and monitoring space, physical distancing space. And I also know quite a large number of community organizations pitching in on this as well to help with some of those supports for the people that will be using these hotel rooms. I have a question for staff about that. Knowing that we used these hotel rooms in the previous, or have been using them really since COVID really hit us hard. I'm wondering how many people that have accessed these hotel rooms, if any of them have transitioned into permanent housing. Are we serving the same clientele, or has it been people coming in and out of these hotel spaces? So that's my question.
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. It's a combination of folks that have been in and out of the hotels and a consistent population that we've been supporting. When we initially launched the hotel response, it was targeting individuals amongst the unsheltered and the precariously housed population that were medically vulnerable. And that group remains fairly consistent, although some people have successfully transitioned out of hotels and into housing. Mr. Cooper is on the meeting today, and I'll ask him to speak specifically to your question.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens and Mr. Chair, and through you. Thank you for the question, Councillor Cassidy. We have had some great success with housing individuals from the hotel. The last number I believe I saw from some of my team members was about 135 people that we've been able to transition to permanent housing from the hotels. We can provide a further update to that number, but overall we've had some success in the last year of housing people in general. It's been over 600 people from the Housing Stability Services team acquiring permanent housing for individuals. We have seen a bit of a transition through the hotel spaces. They are acting as shelter extension spaces, so sometimes individuals aren't as successful in those locations for various reasons. We do have some guest management challenges. We have some other challenges in the spaces, but the agencies that we're working with and funding to provide service at those spaces are doing a phenomenal job in a very difficult time. Our focus right now really is around the vaccination and increasing the vaccination rate for those vulnerable folks in the hotels, and trying to work with our health unit, work on educating some of the individuals around the benefit of a vaccine, and really making sure that they're making an informed decision when they do choose to get the vaccine or not get the vaccine.
Councillor Cassidy.
That's really good information. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to staff. And this is again just one little piece. We keep having these different reports on our homelessness prevention progress here in the city. And I just want to say thank you to staff for keeping on. I know when we announce something, somebody often comes forward, especially through social media, and says, okay, that's fine with that, but what about this over here? And the response from staff is generally, well, this is what we're working on over here. So it's never just one thing. I know our city staff are working really hard to tackle all of the really complicated and complex issues of this problem in the city, and trying to get vulnerable people housed and precariously housed people permanently housed. And I'm just really thankful for the work that staff does. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I see Councillor Van Holst has joined us. He has his hand up. Go ahead, Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just let me confirm, we're talking about item 2.2.
We're talking about the entire consent agenda.
Oh, well, wonderful. Then that's fine. And my question was regarding we've got another $3 million intended for hotel rooms, but my concern about that is at the end of it, we've got nothing to show for it, and I still see people sleeping in doorways, and I wonder if there's some hope in the future for a spectrum of, or some transitional housing that's more permanent, something that the city owns that we can offer to people as opposed to and something permanent and a permanent asset as opposed to the hotel rooms.
Who'd like to handle that one? Mr. Dickens or Mr. Cooper?
Thank you, Chair. I will attempt to take that question. Thank you for the question. I would offer that we do have some outcomes to show for it. At this point, as Mr. Cooper just articulated, at last count, roughly 135 vulnerable individuals have been housed from the hotel system. The hotel system was a measure to combat the congregate living settings during COVID at its peak. And we see that we're still battling that COVID reality still today. When we look at the hotel response, it was a measure to keep people safe. And as we've seen since March of 2020, we've had very few COVID outbreaks amongst our vulnerable population, which is a testament to the organizations that are offering the services, but also to the work that Mr. Cooper and his team does to provide safe space, such as hotels during this pandemic. So some very, very positive outcomes coming out of this. On the capital side, or on the permanent housing side, council will be familiar with the fact that we are nearing completion on a modular housing project, 122 baseline. It is set for completion at the end of the calendar year and occupancy to begin in January. While it is not targeting strictly unsheltered homeless populations, it is an affordable housing project which will create some movement within the housing continuum. We are also in the midst of submitting our plans to CMHC on the second round of rapid housing for another modular housing project. And we continue to work with a number of community organizations on their affordable housing development projects. We are, as civic administration, Mr. Kotsevas and myself, working on a report back to council, which will come later this fall, on an implementation strategy to create 3,000 affordable units over the next 5 years. We feel that there's opportunity there to highlight the good work and set a path forward to really address the questions that the council has.
Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, thank you for the answer. I think those are encouraging things, and of course, you know, I don't want to detract anyway from the work that's done. I'm afraid I'm kind of a person who's the glass is half empty. I'm always looking for or even, you know, a 10th or 5% empty, looking for that extra little bit. I was sharing breakfast with a gentleman who had slept overnight in the back of the Hamilton Road Senior Center, and noticed that, well, when I asked about what kind of support he was getting, suggested that he had some challenges with the mission and another one of the other service providers. And I think this is a common thing for the people that we find sleeping on the streets. And I wonder if there's any strategies or ideas we're looking at to deal with that, or somehow make that a little more attractive to people, or at least again find some alternative to those which deals with the particular complaints they have.
I'm just going to, I'm going to go to staff to see if you want to add anything to that question, but this matter that we're dealing with here is really just the extension of the procurement for these specific services, and the broader discussion about what's happening with the shelter system, I think is probably better for a discussion related to the RFP we're going into to get those services in place for next year. And I just wonder if Councillor Van Holst will get an initial answer here, but some of that is a bit broader than the matter that's before us right now. Go ahead,
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Dickens.
you.
Thank you, Chair. That would have been my response as well, is that Mr. Cooper's team is currently in the midst of wrapping up consultations with the community and those who use the shelter system to look at a comprehensive RFP for more low barrier shelter services and transitional housing support programs.
Satisfied?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's it. And the reason I was asking is I was hesitating about the $3 million, but that was the encouraging piece of information I was looking for. And if that's a part of the plan, then I'm happy to move forward. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time I've taken at your committee.
Okay, we're going to open up the vote. I'm at the end of the speakers list. Let's open that up.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
To item 4.1, which is the fourth report of the London Housing Advisory Committee. You'll notice there's an item for direction in there, which is a request to staff to come to the advisory committee. I understand that's not a problem at all. So is there a mover for the report from the Housing Advisory Committee? Councillor Lewis, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Salee. And we'll open that up for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
Okay, that brings us to the delegation request from Callista Ryan and Jaya Scott. This is about London's opioid crisis. You will see that they circulated some materials as well in the package. I understand that the delegates are here if we were to approve the delegation. So I'll look to committee members to see, would you like to hear from the delegates today? If so, I need a mover. Okay, Councillor Salee is moving that. I'll see if there's a seconder. Councillor Lewis, okay, we'll just vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
I'm going to turn it over to the delegates. You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee, and thanks very much for providing your material in advance. I'm sure all the committee members read it with interest. So 5 minutes, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having us here today. I'm Callista Ryan here with Jaya Scott, and we are here to represent our policy pitch that we presented to the Policy Pitch Association in this past March. And we had Councillor Cassidy come and chat with us and say that this would be a great presentation to bring to the committee. So we're super excited to share this with you.
Our proposal focuses on connecting people to resources that are already existing in the City of London. And the first place we looked for that was on the City of London website ourselves. We want to make the website a place that reduces barriers and destigmatizes access to supports and services for those who are facing opioid addiction. We believe that communications will increase awareness and accessibility so community members get supports faster. So that's why we're here today to talk to you about municipal health and communication strategies to tackle London's opioid crisis.
Jay and I both grew up in British Columbia, which is one of the cities that are tackling the opioid crisis in Canada. And we both have lost relatives and friends in our lives to the opioid crisis. And so when we learned that this was the topic for the Policy Pitch Association this year, we had a lot of ideas and we really wanted to come through with an accessible approach that was feasible for the City of London. And so it kind of rooted into this question of how can we raise awareness about opioids and connect our community members to resources. And so our ask in this committee is update the City of London website to better communicate those resources and services.
We believe that effective communications can maximize ongoing, already happening prevention efforts. We think that the City of London can become a place where not only those struggling with addiction to opioids, but also the networks and people around them, communities in a holistic way, can find resources and information to adequately be aware of causes, supports, and responses in the City of London.
And so when we were working on our pitch, we noticed that finding information on addictions and mental health resources on the City of London website is extremely difficult. If you were to do a keyword search for opioids, you wouldn't be able to find anything related to the resources at all. And this is important as we have a lot of newcomers and citizens in the City of London that might not know where to go to find resources, but might rely on the city for that information. And so when you actually go down to looking for mental health resources specifically, you have to click through 6 different web links. As you can see on my chart on page 222 in the packet, you have to go through several different web links to find mental health and addiction service resources. And notably, it's also only housed under homeless prevention and housing. While this is an important link to attach in that category, individuals and families who are home insecure are not the only demographic affected by the opioid crisis or with mental health as well. So this is an important correlation that we wanted to kind of bring up with the City of London. This is an easy switch that can be made by regrouping and recategorizing and making the resources a bit more accessible and clear, because those that might not be home insecure, who might be struggling or know someone who's struggling, if they see that this category is under homeless prevention and housing, they might not know if this resource is for them. And when you actually get to the mental health and addiction service resources, it says there's 2, now there are 3, but they're not up to date and they're not local either. And so that's something that we also wanted to draw attention to.
As Callista mentioned, we're both from British Columbia, and so we were looking at some of the things, and it's still a struggle here in BC and Vancouver as well, but as an example of a way that the City of London could perhaps approach this is on the main menu of the City of Vancouver. So you'll see on page 223 of the agenda, under people and programs, you can find Healthy Vancouver. So it's under health generally, and then within that, mental health and addictions is an option right there, visible on the main menu. So when you click on that, you'll notice that it's not that there's this particular services being offered by the City of Vancouver itself, but programs being offered throughout the community, including Moms Stop the Harm. So in a very similar way, there are many different organizations working on this issue throughout London, and the city is a great place to bring those resources together.
Yeah, and so our ask is to update the website. Jay and I both went to Western, and now I work in the City of London, and I call the city my home now too. And when I moved here, when we both moved here, acquainting ourselves with, the local government and resources in our community is very important for, students and new members to the city to access, as well as longtime locals as well. And so we believe that this can be one of the solutions to tackling the opioid crisis among many, but it's grounded in community communications and prevention strategies. And we believe it's feasible, affordable, and actionable for the City of London. And we would look forward to seeing a proactive communications approach. And we'd love to hear back from you and any feedback that you might have. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks for keeping to the time. I'll just go to committee members to see what you'd like to do with the delegation. We're certainly going to receive it. Perhaps we also want to forward it on to communications staff for them to review and see if there's changes they want to make to the website. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just through you, I'd move that we receive this as well as forward it to corporate communications for their consideration. I'll put that on the floor and see if I have a seconder, and then I'll just offer one other comment.
Okay, can I go to Councillor Slee? Can you just let us know out loud if you're seconding? I just want to make sure we can hear you, Councillor Slee. see your hand, but I can't hear you. Are you able to unmute? Okay, just bear with me a moment. We'll just make sure we got Councillor Slee there.
Hello? Sorry, I was having difficulties with my audio, so I have to relog back in. But yes, I'm seconding the motion.
Thanks very much, Councillor Slee. We can hear you just fine now. Okay. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Councillor Cassidy, is there anything you wanted to say? You seem like you might be at the meeting for this presentation. Go ahead.
I didn't know if Councillor Lewis wanted to go first. So
I think he does actually. He did say he had something to say. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Cassidy, although I'd happily yield and let you comment. I'll just be very, very brief and say, I appreciate when people are sharing with us difficulties that they're finding, particularly young people with experience navigating online resources. I certainly have experienced some challenges myself, finding things that I used to know exactly where they were on the old city website. And now I sometimes struggle to find them as well. So I think it's really important that we're not only receiving this, but we're sharing it with the staff responsible as they continue to fine tune the new website that we've rolled out. And I know that there have been some problems, and I just wanted to share with our delegation that there have been some challenges making sure that everything could be AODA compliant as well for accessibility. But I think that as we continue to move forward, it's really important to get that kind of feedback, and I appreciate you offering that really great input for us today that can go to our staff and hopefully improve our website.
Councillor Cassidy.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Second time I'm speaking at your committee tonight, so I appreciate that. I was asked to participate in this policy pitch competition back in March and asked to be one of the judges, and the presentations were pretty amazing, and the judges, I was in the company of Dr. Andrea Sarita, to name one. Mr. John Fleming was also a judge as well, and it was tackling the opioid crisis through changes in policy, and how and so groups of students were given that task, and they made their pitch to the judges, and Ms. Ryan, Ms. Scott were in the group that was one of the finalists, and I was pretty impressed with the simplicity of their pitch and how it could be quickly implemented. And, you know, recognizing that City of London is not the delivery of every single one of these services, but I draw attention to, if I don't know if everybody has seen this, but there's a pamphlet that City of London produces called Help Yourself Through Hard Times. So this would be the analog version of what these young people are proposing here. And the Help Yourself Through Hard Times brochure came up a lot when I was doing the community engagement through the poverty panel work. A few agencies held it up and called it their Bible. This is what they relied on to help clients through some of the difficult times that they were navigating. So I really liked the pitch of making the website, having the access through the website as sort of a digital version of this Help Yourself Through Hard Times, where everything is in one place and easily accessible through that. So I'm happy to hear the motion that's on the floor and the support coming from this committee. I didn't doubt that it would happen, and that's why I suggested that Callista and Jaya come to your committee and make a mini version of their pitch to you. So thank you for your support.
Okay, thank you very much to the delegates. I wanted to say I think it's appropriate that you're giving the delegation on International Opioid Overdose Awareness Day, which is today. And very sadly, last year we lost 6,200 people to opioid toxicity deaths in Canada alone. And a lot of those people, around 2,400, were in Ontario, and a lot of them were in London. And, you know, there's a lot of things we have to change at the policy level. Some of them are very big and require action at other levels of government, like the province and the federal government. Some of them are smaller and can be done very quickly. And I'm glad that you came forward with something that we can act on here locally, something we could do fairly quickly. And I think it's going to be a good improvement. So thanks very much. I know the staff appreciate this kind of constructive feedback on how we could do better. And well, I'll just call the vote on the motion.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
Okay, thank you very much. That's passed, and we'll go to council 14th of September, where I'm sure it will be supported by the full council. Thanks very much. That brings us to our deferred matters list. Let's see if there's a mover for that. Councillor Lewis, seconder. Councillor Salee, thank you very much. I asked Mr. Katolik about one item that I think we were expecting to be on our agenda for August, which is the report back about the viewer discretion sort of warning labels around offensive material that's getting delivered to people's homes door to door. And I'm advised that we should expect that report in September. So with that said, any questions about any of the items on the deferred matters list? If not, we're going to open that up for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
To our confidential session, you'll see there's one matter listed on the item on the agenda, which is 6.1, the land acquisition. There's a number of reasons to go into closed session, but it's related to the proposed or pending lease of land by the municipality, including communications necessary to that purpose and a number of other reasons that are listed. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lewis, seconder. Councillor Slee, thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
Closed session. We will come back into public session, but the live stream will not come back on. We will adjourn from public session after we've come back out of closed session. Thanks very much.